Hello, everyone. I am Emily Uri from Fort Worth Moms, and we are having a panel discussion today on a very important and very relevant topic, and that is coping with stress in motherhood. I don't think there is a single mother out there that could not identify with this topic. And hopefully, there's not a single parent out there that isn't going to be able to have something positive to take away from the discussion that we're having today. I am here with several friends from the Women's Center Tarrant County. They all have different areas of expertise, and I've got some hard hitting questions to ask them today. And really, all of this came out of a heart that Fort Worth Moms has for supporting organizations in our community that are helping women and children and families through times of crisis, through hardship, and just through like the stressful thing that is motherhood. And so I'm very excited to welcome my new friends today from the Women's Center. I will let them quickly introduce themselves. Jalissa, why don't we start with you and we'll work our way around the Brady Bunch blocks.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, my name is Jalissa Watts, and I am an employee here at the Women's Center. My role, basically, I help participants with resources for barriers. Barriers can look like food, clothing, diapers, and transportation, to just name a few. And what I guess a fun fact about me, I love women's basketball. So I'm like a sideline coach.
So am I. My kids don't like to watch sporting programs with me because I may or may not yell at the TV. Anyways, off topic. Maybe it's because of my stress in motherhood. I don't know. We'll get there. Okay, who's next?
I'll go next. I'm Sandy Parker. I'm a social worker here at the Women's Center. I've been here almost 27 years, and I work with kids and of all ages and their families to help them deal with stress and maybe a trauma that's happened in their lives. And I really enjoy my work with families here. So thank you for having me.
I'll go next. My name is Latasha Burnett, and I'm a therapist in general counseling. I am a mom as well. I have 5 children ranging from 9 to 27. I do know what it's like to deal with stress because I also have a son that is autistic and he's on the spectrum. In general counseling, we deal with mental health for kids, teens, adults. We have a Pearls program for older adults. I also go out to Fort Worth ISD and I work with the kids out there. I've been here for a little bit over a year.
My name is Deborah Shields. I'm a therapist here at the Women's Center in the Rape Crisis and Victim Services Department. I've been here about 15 years. Mostly I work with adults. I am a mom myself. I have 2 children, grown. They keep bringing good people into our family. So they're both married and I have 5 grandchildren, and very exciting to be here today.
Well, I so appreciate all of you taking time, out of your days to chat with us and to kind of bring this topic to light and just have some good, practical, honest, kind of like women to women discussion about how stress impacts us in ways that we can like practically work through that and manage that, and not just somebody telling me to go get a massage or, take a walk or something. Okay. So all of this panel discussion came to be because Fort Worth Moms has a special partnership with the Women's Center in 2023. And part of one phase of that was an article that was published about 9 coping skills for stressed out moms. And I've already included a link to that article in this description, and you can definitely reference that. I know some people like to watch and listen, and they can gain information that way, but some people like to sit down, kind of read and digest. So you have both options today. Okay, so the topic at hand is how can moms cope with stress? And even in your introductions, you kind of hit on some of these, but let's just sort of lay the framework here. Like, what actually causes the stress that mothers experience? Like, in your experience, where do you see those big stressors?
I'd say trying to balance a schedule. They're working, taking care of the home, taking care of a kid, maybe taking care of a significant other. Sometimes moms are also caregivers to their parents. They just seem to be overextended um, with not much time to take care of themselves, is what I've seen in my office, on top of sometimes unhealed things from their past.
Correct. Yes. Anybody want to add anything else to that? You think that I mean, we could probably go for like 45 minutes talking about the things that cause stress.
Well,
Go ahead.
I would just agree with everything Latasha said, and then just add to it that that all those things she talked about, we have big emotions about, and our kids will have a lot of times really big emotions about, and sometimes we're just not sure what to do with those big feelings when they show up. They can become really overwhelming.
I think there, has definitely been in like we have interactions at Fort Worth Moms with a lot of mothers, but just in different ways than what the Women's Center sees. And there is this kind of like understood, underlining pressure about that whole phrase of being good enough. And we often talk about on Mom Fashions podcast that we host about everyone has this ideal mother that lives inside her brain. And my ideal mother is different than your ideal mother. And she doesn't exist because she is a collection of unrealistic expectations and rules that we kind of, like set for ourselves. The thing that I want to speak into today and really focus on is how we could talk to every mother, I think, that existed, and they would all say, yes, they feel stressed, even stressed out at times. But I really see this proclivity that we just normalize the stress and we kind of accept it as just part of motherhood or part of womanhood. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that. Like, I want to get to a point where I can say, you don't have to keep functioning this way. We're not going to just normalize all these things. So talk about that a bit, and maybe even like, how do we identify what like unhealthy stress is in our lives? That's a long question, but take it and run.
Emily, I kind of was thinking the same thing about the pressures put on moms. I do think society as a whole puts a lot of pressure on moms to be that Brady Bunch mom, being able to do everything and handle everything flawlessly. And especially if there are expectations from childhood that are still on us to be perfect. A lot of times, the people that show up in my office are struggling with perfectionism. They have this idealistic sense of who they should be as a person, as a mom, as an employee, as a spouse. And that pressure is relentless. It drives them to a state of burnout. Burnout is real, not just at work. It can be for us when we're at home. We've given all that we can give and we have nothing left to give. But as moms, we continue to push on. And nobody tells us it's okay to stop.
Anyone else want to comment on that topic a little bit? Like, how can we, because I think we do normalize it. It's sort of in some form or fashion sometimes expected, maybe even like glorified, us being like really frazzled and stressed out and doing all the things and being everything to everybody. But how can, like, what can we say to someone to just say, you know, for them to kind of evaluate, like helping them identify their stress? What would you say to a mom in that situation?
I think some of the things that, like you said, we kind of we just get going and keep going, and we just kind of have a pace, almost an internal pace that we're not paying attention to. And so as we kind of calm down, slow down, take a breath, and pay attention to that internal pace, then we can pay attention to what our thoughts are, what our emotions are, and what our body is doing. Oftentimes, our body can give us a clue as to, oh, when I reach this point, that's a clue for me. I'm overstressed. I need to back up. I need to do a few things to kind of get me back into a state where I can manage better what is going on in my life.
Okay, so let's dive into this to some of the tips that we have shared in the article, and we're going to kind of talk through here. The first one is that y'all suggest practicing co-regulation. What the heck does that mean?
I can speak to that, Emily. Co-regulation. First, let me talk about just regulation. Regulation is where we have the capacity to, like Deborah was just saying, to notice what's happening with our bodies, with our brains, with our emotions, to notice it and to have a sense of agency to do something about it. So as adults, we have whatever ability we have to do that we've learned over the course of our lives. Our children don't have as much capability there. And so co-regulation comes in when we're working together to regulate, or as a parent, as a mom, when we're using our self-regulation to also help regulate our child. So we're doing something to take care of ourselves, like maybe taking some deep breaths, and our child can watch us, or our child can take deep breaths with us. It's using it's for me it's using my sense of regulation and calming, my ability to calm myself, to then also help regulate the child in front of me.
And I agree with Sandy. It's about slowing down and taking the time to identify how you're really feeling in that moment. When we're constantly on the go and going, sometimes we don't slow down to really pay attention to how we're really feeling in that moment. And once we identify it, doing something to express and deal with those feelings, they're going to eventually come out. They're going to come out as a mom in irritability, in tiredness, in depression, in anxiety. They're going to come out in health issues. So if you're not able to slow down, identify what's really going on inside of you, and then do something to regulate yourself, not just your emotions, but your body, regulate yourself, then that stuff's going to come out in an unhealthy way, whether you want it to or not.
Which leads perfectly, thank you, into the second point, which was acknowledging trauma and triggers. And coming from a mom who is now parenting after surviving family violence and childhood abuse, I can vouch that this is true, that you can't go into parenting or grow in parenting unless you are honest and ready and willing to kind of dive into what those trauma that happened to you, but what your defaults are, your triggers are. So talk a little bit more about kind of why that's so important.
Well, one of the things that we know is that children feed off of us. That if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy kind of thing is real. And so if if I'm being triggered by something, my child has said something, my child is out of control, or something else has gone on in my life, and I'm being triggered by that, then I need to pay attention to that, because the reality is, my children will feed off of me. So paying attention to what my triggers are, and I may not know what all the triggers are, that's fine, but I can know some things, using your senses to kind of pay attention to the things that trigger you. The five senses that we learned when we were in elementary school: sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. Did I smell something? Is that a smell that reminds me of something that was going on in my abusive childhood? Did I hear something? Is there a bell ringing and that reminds me of something? Is there too much chaos going on and my nervous system is kind of not able to manage that? So paying attention to those sorts of things and seeing what is it that I can do? Can I move away from the smell? Do I need to, do we need to go somewhere else so that we're not around all the chaos? What are some of the things that I can do for me? Paying attention to those triggers, learning them first, and knowing that those things can kind of be transferred to our children. And then conversely, like Sandy was talking about, our calm can be transferred to our children as well. So, in kind of a strange way, co-regulation works both ways. If I'm not taken care of, then that's going to, fall onto my children. And if I'm taking care of me, then that's going to help my children as well.
And I'd like to add on to what Deborah said. When we think about trauma, sometimes we think if we don't think about it or we don't talk about it, it just goes away. But the thing about trauma is it doesn't go away. And you as a mom may be going through your day and not realizing that all day you're reacting with those trauma responses. Another thing to remember is that trauma just doesn't impact you as the survivor, it impacts everyone around you. As a woman of color, I also focus a lot when it comes to moms of color, when it comes to intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, systemic racism. There are issues that moms of color face that other races don't face that impact our ability to handle and manage stress. So that's something to keep in mind. That impacts the mom, but it's also, there's a term called epigenetics, where it talks about how trauma changes our genetic makeup and we pass that down to our children. So I think as a mom, that even intensifies the fact that it isn't just about stress, figuring out what's underneath the root cause and getting some healing for that. Because if I'm not healed, I could pass that down to my children. So trauma is a big, big elephant in the room when I think about moms and families.
Might I interject this, and you can tell me no, because I am not the expert on this topic. For someone, myself, who does struggle with perfectionism, which I think is often a common response if you who grew up in trauma, right? You're trying to control things. All that's pretty, makes a lot of sense when we start thinking about it. I do want to put out there and say to maybe any other women who are like me and who might have a similar story as I do, is it doesn't mean that you have to be like perfectly healed, that you have to be able to perfectly identify all those things, or you're not a good mom, which is a trap that I fall into. That it is a journey and it's a process, and there are triggers. I sometimes call them like default reactions. It's like I don't have it's not a conscious choice. It's just a default setting in me. I still bump into those. I'm 42. I have kids that are in the middle years, which are just as hard. Bad news to everybody. Sorry to break it to you. And I couldn't have prepared for those or healed for those because I didn't know they were going to exist until I happened to get to this part of my life, which happens to coincide with some really hard things that happened in my family when my mother was 42 and 43, right? And so it's knowing those things. And I love what you said about recognizing your own body. I can tell my jaw gets tight. And I'm like, okay, if my jaw's getting tight, something's bothering me. And I don't know it consciously, but right now, this is bothering me. And so I need to think about and, kind of analyze. So I love all those things you said. And I hope that I haven't said something that y'all wouldn't agree with or you think, no, that's not right. You're free to say that. That's just an expression of my own feeling and an expression of how I've struggled with like perfectionism. You don't have to be perfectly healed to be a good mom.
And Emily, before I step off, I want to add something in there because I think that is a lot of the driving force for moms that are pushing themselves to burnout is perfectionism. And sometimes people do have a misunderstanding of what perfectionism is. It is not that you do things perfectly all the time, it's that you have this idealistic sense of what you should be like, but it's not realistic. No one could meet it, but you're forever feeling like a failure because you're always striving to do it. And perfectionism, you're right, it usually stems from unmet emotional needs in childhood. You learned that you didn't have value and worth because of who you are. You learned that you have value and worth for what you do, right? And so then you're driving yourself to do things that are far beyond your capabilities to achieve those emotional needs of love and acceptance and belonging and praise. So you hit it right on the nail, I think.
I'm going to skip around in terms of how the article has things organized because I think this next point so naturally fits into kind of what we're talking about. And I will let everyone know that our friend Latasha had to go. She had a previous work commitment that she has to step off for. So thank you very much. You did a great job. Thank you for everything you added. She'll see this later and feel our gratitude, I hope. So the next point I want to bring up, and I'll see, I really just do these panel discussions for my own like counseling help. So thank y'all. I just get to sort out and work out all these things with y'all. But the next point is, and I'm bad about it, and I want to hear what you say, validate your own feelings. Like even saying it, it's like, I really don't know what you mean. Like explain that.
One of the things that I find with moms, women in general, but moms in particular, is that we don't do what you're saying, validate our feelings. And, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that way, or it's not that bad, or, we do a lot of minimizing, or, I'm crazy for feeling this way, or I'm bad for feeling this way, or whatever. And what I find in sessions is that if they'll just be talking about what's going on and how they're feeling and kind of sharing all the crazy stuff that they think they're thinking and that kind of stuff. If I just validate for them, well, of course you would be feeling that way. It makes perfect sense that you would be feeling that way. Why wouldn't you be thinking that? Why wouldn't you be feeling that? Those would be normal responses to what's going on for you. One of the advantages that having one age, but also worked someplace for a long period of time, is that I've got a body of knowledge that I can use to help my clients. And so I get to say, what you're experiencing is very common, actually, among women, among moms, among people who have been through what you've been through or are in the situation that you're in. And oftentimes we just don't talk about those things. So we don't know. So there's some power in knowing that, oh, it's not just me. I'm responding, just normally. So validating is hugely important. Just letting somebody, and that as we validate, that lowers our anxiety. And so when our anxiety is lower, we're thinking more clearly, and we can function better in doing what we need to do. And perhaps we can let ourselves off the hook for having to make a 5-course meal every night. Nobody's going to die if we eat frozen pizza and macaroni and cheese for a while, and so as we kind of lower some of that anxiety and lower those expectations, then that can work its way out in our lives.
A phrase that I use with my families here at the Women's Center a lot is to say exactly what Deborah just said, is name it to tame it. So if we can name what it is we're experiencing in our emotions, in our minds, in our bodies, if we can name it, just the act of naming it can a lot of times tame that and just bring it down a notch a little bit. And it's an easy thing to say to yourself, and it's an easy thing also to say to your kids, to help them learn that that if I can name what I'm experiencing, then it's gonna validate it a little bit, and it's gonna take it down a notch.
Okay, for the next, I'm going to kind of put two together that came from the article we have linked, and that is, which y'all are great about just leading into the next thing, is simplifying your schedule, which the two of you just kind of talked about, and also putting together a personal treasure chest. So when I have gone through seasons of feeling really stressed out, I can get in this loop to where it feels like it's too big or too hard for me to dig myself out or like to help myself. But it isn't. It's not a mountain. It is like when you start taking those steps, maybe the mountain is there, but you see it gets smaller. Like you can get yourself out of these feelings and situations. So tell me more about simplifying your schedule and putting together a personal treasure chest.
Well, I can speak to the personal treasure chest piece. Um, uh, we're talking about emotional regulation and things to do to kind of help us when we find ourselves in stress. And so talk to people about being deliberate about putting together a treasure chest of things that can help you when you get into a situation where you're feeling overwhelmed or where you're feeling out of control or you just don't know what to do. And so the reason I want people to be deliberate about that is because when we get in those situations, we don't have time to think about, oh yeah, what can I do? Well, I could do this and this. We're just not able to think clearly like that. So we want to have deliberately put together a treasure chest ahead of time so that we can reach in and pick out something and use it, because that one may not work. I mean, they may need to reach in and pick another one, and that one may not work, but I keep reaching in because there's an array of things in my treasure chest that I can use. And so some of those things are short-term things like breathing or music, or maybe talking to a friend or taking a walk or some things like that. Some of them may be more long-term or require more prep work. Like maybe I enjoy cooking, and so I plan a meal and I go get all the stuff and I work on making the food or something like that. Maybe I need something real physical that is going to kind of work out some of whatever's going on physically for me. So I go clean the bathroom, and so I have the cleanest bathroom on the on the block today because I needed some physical work with that. Maybe I like gardening, and so I go out and I garden for a while, and that kind of helps clear my head. Maybe all I'm able to do is just go outside for a minute or two and breathe, get some fresh air, get some sunshine, get away from whatever the stressors are inside. Calm my body, calm my mind, and then go back into it. So when we talk about a treasure chest, we're talking about short-term things, long-term things, things that I can use in a moment, things that I can plan for. Sometimes other people, my children perhaps, can be involved in that, sometimes not. But having that available to you at a moment's notice is the real key to it, because when we're there, we don't have what it takes to think about, what can I do to help myself with this right now?
I'd like to add to that, Deborah, in that we can have that treasure chest of things that help us specifically. And then also we can develop a treasure chest of things that help us with our child and help with that co-regulation piece. And as we've been talking about things like perfectionism and past trauma and these things that can be like a mountain, like you said, Emily, one of the things I found is even in the midst of those things that feel like a mountain, sometimes it's just the simplest thing that really makes a world of difference. Like Deborah was talking about breathing. Coming back to our own breath is one of the most regulating things that we can do. And also, connection is another really regulating thing, safe, soft, warm connection. And so, when we're trying to have a treasure chest of things to use with our child, together with our child and co regulate, some of those things might just be modeling for your child. So maybe you just put your hand over your heart and you just say, oh, wow, I'm noticing that my heart's beating kind of fast. So I think I want to calm my body down right now. And so you take some deep breaths, and maybe your child is able to do the same thing and join with you in that. Maybe you blow some bubbles together, because when that might get you outside possibly, and you're blowing some bubbles. When you do that, you're taking deep breaths, you're blowing out long and slow to make those bubbles, and then you also have the reward, and it's connective. So there's things, if you can find ways to put together that breath piece and something that's connective, and it could be some kind of safe touch, reading with the child, holding hands, putting your hands on each other's hearts, and it can be different things like that. But if you can combine some breath and some connection, then it very often will help regulate both of you.
We have a couple things in our house. You try a lot and then you find the ones that work for you. For me, smells actually do make a difference. And so I have a bubble bath bottle that it kind of has a lavender or kind of that sort of smell. And it sounds really silly, but it is something. If I'm starting to feel the jaw and all that happen, I can literally just go in the bathroom. And this is something that I've worked through, even like with my counselor, having that little, treasure box, toolbox, stuff that that can kind of help you break that loop of just that smell. There's something about it that makes me feel like it's like a refreshing, or it feels clean. It's like there's this mental thing that happens with me, and there is the element, like, what am I doing? I'm breathing it in, and I'm slowing down the breath to breathe it so I can smell it really well. For my daughter, who is neurodivergent, she can get into kind of like meltdown states. And something that we found for her is there's no rationalizing or logical brain happening in this. She has to have some sort of like physical thing that can help her. And we have a phrase in our house called turn it around. And at this point, I can just say, you need to turn it around. And that's not like a discipline thing. She literally turns. So it like makes her stop. And and we kind of also do it as like a diffusing thing, because it's kind of funny, like, oh, you better turn it around. Let me see you spin, trying to like diffuse how the meltdown or the disappointment that's happened to her or something is bothering her. And that physical like spinning for her like helps her. It kind of just breaks whatever loop or cycle that she's in. So those are some ways that we kind of do that in our own home. Okay, Miss Watts, I know that you are not speaking up very much because I think your internet is a bit on delay, but I would love to pause and let the delay catch up. And if there's something you want to jump in and add, please do.
I don't have much to add. My scope of work is a little bit different, so my experience is just a little separate. I will say though, for some of the participants, they're usually in crisis as it relates to food, shelter, clothing, those types of things. So I think bringing that, well, I'll say connecting with them to see what it is that they need is something that really helps me help them, because they'll tell me, oh, I don't feel comfortable asking for help, or oh, I don't feel comfortable coming in because of their appearance or something like that. So I try and I guess kind of make it easy for them or kind of meet them where they are, and just kind of change the scenery. Sometimes they get caught up wanting to have phone conversations, and I'll say, well, sometimes you can come into the office. I'll invite you into my space, and we'll just kind of hang out in one of the office spaces and kind of break that ice a little bit more, to make sure that they're comfortable. And I just believe coming from a situation like that where you don't know where you're gonna sleep that night or something like that is very difficult, and that is stressful as well. So sometimes I'll pack them a little snack bag, put a little journal in there and a pen or some sticky notes to kind of have them to remind themselves some kind of way. Um, like how you add it to the mirror, or you just put it on the back of your phone to remind yourself of who you really are, what you accomplished that day. So y'all have been given a lot of good information. I am not a mom, so I'm just kind of taking it all in.
Yes, take notes for later, possibly, maybe not. Well, definitely. I mean, we definitely want to hear from your perspective of things too, because not having enough money to meet your needs, not having, shelter, not having enough food, not only for yourself, but it's a whole nother level of stress when you don't have that for your children. Not to diminish, it's still a trauma and stressful when you don't have those things for yourself. But that is a really important piece of, I think, what the Women's Center offers to our community. And though, like, those things are just as difficult and stressful, and they feel like big mountains too, that you can't cross over. So I think all of these things we've been talking about, whether you're in a spot that you are, parenting from, recent or childhood traumas, or you are in a current situation, whether you're in an abusive situation, an unsafe situation, if you're in a situation where your day-to-day needs aren't being met, you're not able to do that, or someone's taking them away from you. I think all of these things that we are talking about, it helps. It fits into all those categories. The last thing that I want to chat about is a point that you have in the article that says seek help, and talk a little bit about why it's okay to do that, but also talk about how can the Women's Center that lives right here in Tarrant County and serves more than just Fort Worth. Tarrant County's in that word. How can you help moms with these things we've been talking about?
Well, at the Women's Center, we have a whole range of services. You've heard several of them be talked about here today, whether it's working with our homeless community. We have services for those who have experienced some sort of crime or abuse in their family, from children, adults, male, female, anyone who's been the victim of some sort of crime. We have, that's Rape Crisis and Victim Services. We also have general counseling, where Latasha was from. And so it's a little broader in scope. You don't have to qualify for those services. You can, they'll talk to you about anything you need to talk to them about. So general counseling, rape crisis victim services, and also our employment services. So we actually started out as over 40 years ago, helping women find their way into careers, into employment. And so these days we help anybody who comes in who needs, who is unemployed or underemployed and could use some help building a resume, networking, things like that, to be able to make a difference in their lives for themselves and also for their families. And so when you say, Emily, to reach out for help, I think that's so important, to know that you deserve some help, that you don't have to do all these things yourself, that there are resources. And when the services aren't here at the Women's Center, then we have case managers who will absolutely do their best to connect you with whatever services are in our community. So if your need isn't listed in what I just talked about, then please reach out and call our helpline, and they can help you be connected to whatever the resources are that you need.
Listen, as you can see, like magic, the website URL appeared on the screen, so you can definitely go there. You can get more information about the different programs. You can also find ways to call, email, contacts, submit a form. There are lots of different ways that you can reach the people doing great work at the Women's Center. Before we kind of wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to throw out there that you really want the parents watching this to know? Maybe we've covered it all. You can, like I mentioned before, we have the article. There are 9 tips. We didn't quite get to all 9, but we kind of covered most of them. So you can click the article and you can read that. You can also use it for reference. Sometimes those hard things in our heart takes a few times to kind of review before we really absorb them. Also, you can, as always, check out fwmoms.com. We have resources that support women working through the hard parts of motherhood, but also all types of other resources for moms all across North Texas. So check us out there. Again, thank y'all very much. We have had several comments kind of streaming through as we've been doing this live, and it has definitely been relatable to a lot of women. So thank you so much for providing this resource and for all the work that you do through the Women's Center and for kind of sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today. We will see you later. Bye-bye.